live in a world of some pretty unfortunate realities. And one of those realities is that class is only an hour and 20 minutes, and we can't always get to the questions that we have. And so, welcome to Questions with Professor Morrison. I am your host, Professor Morrison, and I'm going to answer all those burning questions that you got an opportunity to ask on the screen during class, but I didn't get an opportunity to answer because I talk so much. So with that being said, let's get to the first question.
Lights on, we don't disappear. Shooters coming, but we staying here. Yeah. Counting all my blessings, it ain't fair. Only got love for my fam. Cause when the lights on, we don't disappear.
That's an interesting question and an interesting observation about church. What I will say is it probably was a lot like church in the sense that it was probably varying responses. Some people hear what pastors have to say and don't follow it at all, right? Some people do the week-to-week thing like you're talking about. What I will say is, number one, I wasn't there. So I can't give you a definitive answer about that, but if I'm guessing based on my own experience with people and teachers, especially the kind that are so different culturally than what people were used to, like Jesus was, I would guess that it happened at varying levels and levels of commitment, right? So think about this. Jesus' disciples, right? Jesus' disciples were all about what Jesus was preaching, right? They followed him for 3 years. They followed him even to the point that he was about to be crucified, which is, we'll talk about this, but a really kind of shameful way to die, right? But they followed him basically his whole ministry. But then you have people like the rich teacher of the law who says, I will follow you. He tells Jesus with his mouth, I'll follow you wherever you go. But then Jesus says, well, I need you to sell your stuff. And he's like, I don't know about that, right? And so I think that it happens at varying levels. And some people would have taken that as their lifeblood and the way that they did their life from now on. But others probably thought, there's some good stuff here, good stuff there. But I don't know. So the salt and light question. We talked about this just a little bit in class, but I'll reemphasize some things. Number one, salt brings flavor to things, right? Salt also is a preservative, specifically for meats, right? And so the other thing that I want you to keep in mind is that if a salt or salt doesn't have saltiness, it's basically useless, right? It doesn't have any other great purposes. And also, like, think about a light bulb, right? If a light bulb doesn't turn on and illuminate the house, then what really is the point of it, right? And so I think on two levels, or I think on one level rather, what Jesus was saying is that the people who are in the crowd have something meaningful to bring to the world, right? There is something meaningful about their experience, right? And that's not something that they have heard probably a lot before, maybe even ever, right? These are people who are poor. These are people who are thought of as the lowest of low in society. And societies don't tend to be all that positive about the lowest of lows, right? Think about our society. There, across the country, there are city governments that are thinking about strategic ways not to feed or help the homeless, but just to get them out of the city, right? Just there are cities that will put spikes on benches that you have to put money into to get the spikes to go down, right? So homeless people can't sleep there, right? Some cities are making it illegal to sleep outside, which is just crazy, right? But that's not anything new, right? The people who have the least in our societies oftentimes are the worst treated. And so Jesus comes and he tells them, in a culture where there are no refrigerators, that you are salt. You are something so important, so useful, not only for bringing flavor, but for preserving the world, right? That's a revolutionary kind of idea for the people who are in the crowd listening to him. You're the light. You illuminate. You bring something positive. You allow people to walk in clarity in this world. You are. That's an important statement, right? Jesus. Yeah. Just taking the text for it, Jesus has two separate teachings about divorce in the Bible, and specifically in the book of Matthew, what we're talking about. And he talks about remarrying. He talks about women remarrying. He talks about men remarrying. He's speaking to a specific context of marriage and divorce. And so, yeah, I think from reading the text, at the very least, Jesus had idea or understanding of some awareness of some marriage and remarriage after divorce. So, yeah, I'm going to say that. Thing that I want to keep in mind is that the Sermon on the Mount is a title for a collection of teachings that Jesus did, right? And so the level of explanation that he gives is going to come at a varying degree. I would say in general, his interactions with the Pharisees do a lot of explaining about things like his teaching about judgment, his teachings that entail what it means to be a good disciple, right? When he's talking about praying and fasting, he's calling back to places that Pharisees and Sadducees and teachers of the law would be, like the synagogue or the temple, right? Or when you're in the courts, right? You're on the streets. These are the places that these people would be, and doing things that are boastful, like telling people, "Oh, I'm fasting," right? Or praying loudly so everybody could hear how righteous they are, right? This is the places that they will be doing that. And so when he has his interactions with them, you can see this kind of playing out. Go back and read some of those scriptures where Jesus is having some of these heated debates or heated conversations with Pharisees or Sadducees. And Matthew is usually Pharisees and teachers of the law, right? Go back and look at them, and Jesus will do a good bit of explaining of some of that teaching, right? He'll flesh some of that out a little bit more. The other thing is that he does a good bit of calling back to this concept of bearing good fruit, right? He does a lot of talking about bearing good fruit. And so maybe there isn't a concise place where Jesus says, well, I'm going to explain. He does that some in Matthew where he says the disciples will be confused about a parable. Big surprise, they're confused about everything, right? They'll be confused about a parable, and then he will say, come on, I'll explain it to you, right? Or it's just for you. I'll explain this just to you, right? But go back and read some of those stories where he's having interactions with Pharisees or Sadducees or Herodians or teachers of the law. Go back and read those, and you'll get a good idea of some of the deeper explanation for the teaching that he gives on the Sermon on the Mount, for sure. In general, what I'll say is I'm humble enough to admit that I don't know a lot about those religions. Not that I haven't done any reading on them, but there's a difference between reading and having book knowledge about something and then knowing things, right? And there are some things that you really can't know without being a part of. And the reality is that I'm just not. And for me to speak on behalf of those groups would be irresponsible. I'll say that. What I do know of these religions, I think all three, though admittedly I don't know a lot about Mormonism. I do know that Mormons consider themselves Christians, right? And a lot of Christians consider Mormons Christians. I don't know what their relationship with the Bible is. Once again, that's not my particular background. But I do know that there are a lot of similarities between the holy books of Jewish people. In fact, the Old Testament is their holy book in large part. And if you read the Quran, there will be a lot of overlap and similarities between Old Testament stories. I've been told by several Muslim scholars that Jesus is a character in the Muslim faith, though maybe not the Messiah, more like a prophet, though I'm not 100% sure that prophet even means the same thing. But I really, really want to caution us, not even just with religious groups, caution us against speaking on behalf of groups that we don't know or aren't a part of in general, right? There is something to a lived experience. As a black person, I can't speak on behalf of people who are Latino or people who are Asian or white, right? I can only speak to a black experience, a black racial experience. In that same way, I can really only speak to a Christian, even a specific Christian experience. I can't tell you what it's like to be Catholic, right? And I think approaching group identities in that way is the healthiest, and I would even say most Christ-like way to approach it, because it's humble. It doesn't put myself above or as smarter than or feeling as if I know things that I don't, because I don't. That's an interesting question. So I spent a few years in residence life. I was the director of Mabee Hall and Mackenzie Hall the year before that. So I spent 2 years in residence life and decided that I wanted to transition out of that. I wasn't 100% sure what I was going to do, to be honest with you. I had made plans to go to wrestling school. As many of you know, I'm a huge wrestling fan. And just kind of by the grace or an act of God, an opportunity arose for me to become a professor. And I love teaching. I love being up in front of people. I love talking to people about the Bible, as you probably have gathered from my inability to hit the high notes in the book of Matthew. But I love the opportunity to do this. And so instead of pursuing one of my passions, which is wrestling, I decided to pursue this one. And that's how I ended up being a professor. Yeah. And I also, oh, it's blurry. Dag nabbit. I also really love college students, to be honest. College was a fantastic time in my life. It was a time of growth, it was a time of struggle, but it was also a time where I really got to know myself. And I really feel like working on a college campus is a unique opportunity, because you get to come alongside people as they are figuring out who they are. And I love that, and I think that's ministry, and that's why I'm here. That's why I've worked in several positions on campus. That's why I'm always interested in learning how to do that better and differently, because I think that you all are some of the most important people on the earth. And I think that y'all are, to be cliche, the leaders of tomorrow. And I would love to share whatever I have with you all before you go out there and do that. So.
Now Malcolm said we ought to stop singing, start swinging. I ain't saying I'm agreeing, but his point is not bulimic. It's 2018 and we done been there, done that, seen it. The oppressors getting bullied and the prophets done stop preaching.